Hello and welcome to week 2 of our webinar on creating effective strategies in psychotherapy, focusing on acceptance and commitment therapy and solution-focused brief therapy. I'm Richard Nongard with fastceus.com, and we will get started here in just a minute or so. I want to welcome you to today's presentation. As I said, we'll get started in a moment. Over here is a chat box, and you can sign into the chat box. You can introduce yourself, say hello, tell us where you're from. That would be awesome. I also want to let you know we have a forum on the internet, and I've made it convenient since it seems like there are almost 1 billion people on Facebook. If you go to changeworkforum.com, that'll actually take you to our page on Facebook, to our group on Facebook, and that is an active group that is very well moderated with only licensed mental health professionals, social workers, psychologists, family therapists, mental health counselors, addiction professionals, and we'd love to have your participation in that forum. That's also a great place if you're not participating in this webinar as a real-time event and you're watching the 24/7 video archive that's available to ask any questions that you might have during this presentation if you're watching it after hours. But again, I want to thank everybody for participating today. We have a lot of really good upcoming webinars. We have our webinar on the changes in the DSM-5 coming up. We have a webinar on managing impulsivity in mental health disorders coming up. And of course, we offer professional ethics as both a real-time webinar each and every month and in about 10 different formats on our website as a 24/7 continuing education course. So thank you for participating today. Sign into the chat box over here and we'll get started in just a moment. Hello, I'm Richard Nongard with Peachtree Professional Education and fastceus.com, and I'd like to thank you for participating in this webinar, part 2 of our series on creating effective interventions in psychotherapy by using the techniques of acceptance and commitment therapy, which is referred to as ACT therapy, and solution-focused brief therapy. Again, if you're just joining us, over here on the side is the chat box. Please sign in, say hello, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from. If you have any questions during the real-time webinar, you can always type it over here in the chat box. I'm available and we'll be happy to answer any questions and to provide any clarification. If you're participating in this after hours in our 24/7 video on demand center, you can post any questions you have in our forum at changeworkforum.com. That'll take you to our page on Facebook, and it would be great to have you participate there. If we can create a vibrant community of mental health professionals, all interacting in a way that can benefit each other and benefit our profession, that would be just awesome. There are several hundred members there right now, and we hope that you will join us over there on Facebook at, again, changeworkforum.com. Again, I'm really happy that you've participated. My goal in these webinars is not only to give you a forum to meet your 3 hours of continuing education as required by the state boards, but also to share with you some practical ideas and strategies that you can really use with your clients. This is, of course, my office where I actually see clients. The camera's actually set up at about the place, well, a little bit further back, but where my clients sit. And I often do an initial assessment and visit with clients right here at my desk. Of course, like any other therapist, there's comfortable furniture over here, recliners, and more like a living room setup where I often visit with clients as well. But I'm going to be sharing with you today not only concepts and ideas, but I'm also going to be demonstrating some things, just like I did last week, because I find that I do a better job of therapy with my clients when I actually take some time to practice those things that I ask my clients to do. And so I'm going to guide you through some of these processes as well. One of the other things I'm going to do in today's webinar is I'm going to actually show you some interaction with a client. Now, for confidentiality reasons, I'm not using a real client here. I'm going to show you some clips from some role play exercises. These are probably about 6 minutes each. I will probably show one or two in today's webcast. And the reason why I'm going to show these clips is I want you to not only be able to experience the things that I guide you through during this process, but I'd like you to see how I actually use these techniques to interact with people as well. I'm going to pick up kind of where I left off last week. And last week I had shared with you the 6 core functions of acceptance and commitment therapy. Those actually are written in Stephen Hayes' book titled Acceptance and Commitment Therapy by Stephen Hayes and Kirk Strozal and Kelly Wilson, a great book. During the webinars, I like to show books so you can actually see what they look like and get an idea for some resources that would be valuable to you. Of course, if you ever miss a book title, you can type it in the chat box. I'll be more than happy to type it for you over there. And you can always post in our forum, changeworkforum.com, any resources that you think would be useful to share with other professionals on the subject. And of course, the book, Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, by Stephen Hayes with Spencer Smith. And this is a great workbook that therapists can actually use with clients if you have high-functioning clients who you wanted to guide through the workbook. But there are lots of exercises and things here that you can adapt to the work that you do within your own personal style. There's not a right or a wrong way to implement these ideas. What's important is that we look at the evidence, we look at the research, we see what works best for the clients on our caseload. And when we have people who come into our office, we share with them the techniques and the ideas and the therapies that research has shown to be very effective. And again, I did show it last week, but this is a great book that I actually picked up earlier this year. It's titled Act Verbatim for Depression and Anxiety, and it's by Michael Tuhick and, again, Stephen Hayes. Stephen Hayes is a researcher at the University of Nevada in Reno. And Stephen Hayes has developed what is referred to as acceptance and commitment therapy. And the cool thing about ACT therapy is that there are literally hundreds and thousands, and there are thousands of journal articles talking about the improved efficacy that applications of ACT therapy have over traditional approaches to psychology, psychotherapy, social work, and counseling. So I encourage you to look at those evidence-based protocols and research. And I mentioned this last week, but I'm going to mention it again because I think it's very important. Instead of going to google.com and doing a web search, for example, ACT therapy and depression, or a Google search, ACT therapy and addiction, or a Google search, ACT therapy and pain control, go to scholar.google.com. Instead of www, put scholar.google.com. And when you type in ACT therapy and depression, or when you type ACT therapy and anxiety, or whatever you want to type in there, what you're going to get are literally thousands of journal articles and academic textbooks that talk about the efficacy of using these methods to help people problem solve. Now, I'm going to start where I left off last week, and I'm going to talk a little bit about relational frame theory, because as you begin to study acceptance and commitment therapy, you will hear the term relational frame theory. And I could do an entire webinar just on relational frame theory and probably not have enough time. But I'm going to talk about some of the basic points that Hayes makes in his workbook, Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life. And I think these are really important. It's essential for us to understand that relational frames are being created by our minds throughout each and every day. What I mean by relational frames is we relate one thing to another. For example, if you look at your clock, that is simply the action of looking at your clock or your watch. And, and, and it could be left at that. But what we do is we create an arbitrary relational frame. We look at our clock and instantly our mind has a mental picture of our boss yelling at us because we're going to be late for work, and we feel anxiety. And so we look at our clock, an innocuous activity, but we feel instantly a sense of anxiety. Where did that anxiety come from? The anxiety came from the relational frame. Late means punishment. Now, some of these relational frames may have validity. Many of these relational frames, though, do not. As I mentioned last week, 98% of the things we worry about actually never manifest as reality. Most of our anxiety really is futile energy spent predicting the future when really all we have is the now. And when we can understand an anxiety disorder or a panic disorder or a post-traumatic stress disordered client's relational frames, then we can create therapeutic interventions that help us to actually break these things. Now, when we have a relational frame, we have any kind of a cue. It could be an emotional cue, an environmental cue, it could be a language cue. A lot of acceptance and commitment therapy research really focuses on the structure of language. Perhaps this is why I'm drawn to acceptance and commitment therapy. I had early training in Ericksonian, Milton Erickson's work, and Ericksonian methods of clinical hypnosis, which of course is in large part about the structure of language and how we can use language to create change within the client. The words that we use often have a frame attached to them, and the frames can be can really be a number of different types. They can be frames of what are called coordination. For example, this is the same as this. This is similar to this. This is like this. Those are called frames of coordination. Now, how does that translate into psychology and the work that we do with our clients? A client comes in, and let's say they present with anxiety, and they say, this is happening, so that is the same thing as this happening. They have a frame of coordination. One thing happens, and they use it to predict the future, and that builds their sense of anxiety. Frames can be temporal frames, or they can be causal frames. These might include before and after, if and then, cause of, or the parent of, or so on. And these are temporal or causal frames. Then we make comparative and evaluative claims. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you have any clients who are depressed? Do you have any clients who have a negative self-image? Do you have clients who have tremendous strengths, who are awesome people, but see themselves not as the rest of the world sees them, and so they never take action using the strengths and resources they possess, but instead engage in self-defeating behavior? Well, comparative and evaluative frames certainly could be a component of that. These are better than, or worse than, or bigger than, or faster than, or prettier than, and so on. There are deictic frames. These are frames that reference the perspective of a speaker, such as I, or you, or here, or there. And anybody who works with personality disordered clients, or as I've referred to them in the past, people with a sense of diffused personality. They don't know where I begin and somebody else stops. Those people who, we might not diagnose them with a personality disorder, but certainly have difficulties in their relationships with others, sometimes have difficulty with the frames of reference or related to the perspective of a speaker. And then there are, of course, spatial frames, near, far, close, here, there, those types of things. But these are the variety of different relational frames that we can create. And there are, of course, more than these, but I wanted to sort of outline those things so you can really see what we're talking about. And the way this manifests in therapy, in the work that you do with the clients who you work with, let's take the addicted client. I don't know if you work with any addicted clients, but if you work with addicted clients like I do as a marriage and family therapist and couples counseling, or if you're working with individuals to help them create a recovery program, there are a lot of relational frames, arbitrary comparisons, analogies, spatial relationships, evaluations, didactic frames that have been created by our clients to justify their behaviors, to excuse their behaviors, to avoid changing behaviors. Now, most of you who are viewing this are familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, the first of the research, of the empirically validated treatment modalities. The work of Aaron Beck, the work of Albert Ellis, and as we've really seen the evolution over the last 10 years of cognitive behavioral therapy into a mindfulness-based approach. So we now have mindfully based cognitive therapy, or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. I mean, lots of different names for the same approach. But when we work with clients to help them identify their cognitive errors, a lot of these cognitive errors are actually what Stephen Hayes refers to as the relational frames. This is where they come from. It's important to note that what Ellis and Beck did was they said, okay, here they are. But what Hayes has actually done is helped us to figure out why they're there in the first place. And when we see the incredible creativity of the human mind, then we can see that stopping this process is probably an impossibility. The reason why is because humans are always swimming in their thoughts. Here's a question for you, something you can ponder. Does a fish know that it lives in water? Does a fish? I know you came for a continuing education course, but maybe you'll laugh a little bit while you earn your CEUs. Last week we earned CEUs with the eyes closed. Today, perhaps you'll earn CEUs with a giggle or at least a smile. At least I know my 4-year-old stepdaughter digs this. I am now a fish. There you go. I bet you've never seen a professional therapist doing a clownfish imitation, but that was my best attempt. For those of you who missed it, let me show you one more time. There you go. There's my clown face imitation. Now think about a fish. Does a fish know that they're swimming in water? They're oblivious to this. A lot of people mistake meditation for clearing the mind, for stopping thought. People who have never meditated, or some people who are very frustrated by meditation, believe that meditation is about stopping thought. That would be impossible. That would be a lot like draining the pool or the pond or the lake for the fish. We can't exist without swimming in our thoughts. And we are always creating relational frames every moment and every second of the day with every thought, every feeling, and every sensation. And so when we recognize that the goal of therapy is not to stop this, but the goal of therapy is to help a client live fully in the moment so they can experience this without the impulse of acting on these relational frames, then we can actually see progress with the clients that we work with. That's why it's important to understand the issue and the process of relational frames. Now, Hayes, in his book, comes up with a very creative way of illustrating this, and so I'm going to guide you through the process that Hayes has us go through in his workbook. Take out a piece of paper wherever you are, a pencil, a paper. If you don't have one, you can always open up a notepad on your computer screen. And what I want you to write down is any noun. It doesn't matter what it is, an object of some kind, an animal, an object, something you see in the room, something that you simply create in your mind. It doesn't make a difference. Write that down. Give you a minute to think. I can't sing the Jeopardy song. Dee, 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 dee. I'm a lousy singer. I'm a monotone. But you have one now. You have a noun written down. Now, I want you to think of another noun, another something. Something either in the room or something in your own mind, that's okay, but write that down also. So now you have a piece of paper and it has two nouns written down. I'm going to write down cup, that's my choice number one, and car, that's what I'm writing down for number two. So if you have nothing written down on your piece of paper, just go with cup and car. I came up with cup because my big iced tea is here. And my car is parked out front. So that's how I came up with it. Now, answer this question as you consider the two things you wrote down. How is the first one like the second one? How is the first one like the second one? Look at the two things you wrote down and answer the question. How is the first one like the second one? I was able in just a moment, I just came up with cup and car. I didn't plan that out. And so they both carry something. That's how they're like each other. Okay. Now, I want you to go on to another question. And the second question is, how is the first noun better than the second one? How is the first noun better than the second one? So the first question is, how is it like the second one? The next question is, how is the first one better than the second one? Come up with an answer for what you wrote down. The answer I came up with almost instantly, a couple of seconds ago, was, well, you can actually hold a cup and carry it with you. You can't do that with a car. It's too big. By the way, do you notice these associations are purely arbitrary? They are relational frames that we have created about these two things. Now, here's the third question. The third question, a little bit difficult, but how is the first one the parent of the second one? How is the first one the parent of the second one? Wow. How is the first one? Look at the list, whatever you wrote down. How is the first one the parent of the second one? Even if it's a difficult question, if I give you enough time, you'll actually come up with an answer. So I'll give you another 10 seconds and come up with an answer. How is the first one the parent of the second one? You might come up with a silly answer, but you'll be able to come up with an answer. Well, the first one is like the second one because a cup holds water, and you can't have anything without water. And so the water, the cup that carries water actually creates the car. Now, we all know this is absurd. And by the way, what you came up with might be absurd, but yet you were still able to come up with something. This is how the human mind works. We create arbitrary relationships between things, between thoughts, between feelings, between sensations all day long, whether they are factual or not. And our mind is doing this all day long. It's never not doing this because we're literally swimming in our thoughts. You can see that it is impossible for all of these arbitrary relationships to be valid. For example, we can come up with an arbitrary frame for how everything is the parent of something. We can always answer that question with that creative part of our mind, but we know it is impossible for everything to be the parent of everything. When we understand the way the mind works, and relational frames are created, then we understand the busyness of the human mind, the difficulty our impulsive clients have in not taking action. We can understand the frustration our manic clients are experiencing. We can understand why somebody who seems to have so much going for them in life continues to make unhealthy choices that cause them pain and suffering and difficulties. By the way, creating relational frames is not something that only adults can do. Babies do this too. Children do this too. And we have a lifelong experience of creating arbitrary relational frames between one thing and everything else in our everyday experience and everyday existence. And this constant stream of thoughts and constant stream of arbitrary relationships is what we need to be able to teach our clients to step back from. And we can teach our clients to put some space between them and their thoughts. Remember in session number 1, I talked about the observant self. Then our clients, who although may have creative minds with wisdom in that creativity, can separate themselves from those thoughts, taking action in the now on that which is healthy rather than that which is unhealthy. One of the other reasons that I really like acceptance and commitment therapy is it really makes the assumption that the human mind is a magnificent machine and very creative. And the subconscious mind is often able to learn from indirect suggestion, from metaphor, from parable, from stories. And so in acceptance and commitment therapy, stories and metaphor and parable are often told to clients. And I use a lot of this in the work that I do with clients. Sometimes I'll use a story or a metaphor to teach something about the mind and about problem solving. Sometimes I will use a metaphor or a story so that my client can actually attach to it the meaning that's important for them and leave my office with those what are referred to as indirect suggestions, Ericksonian language patterns, and psychotherapy to take action in a healthy way. Let me give you a couple examples. I'll give you 2 examples from Hayes' book because I think they're pretty good. Hayes talks about teaching clients how trying to problem solve the way they've been problem solving is a lot like a Chinese finger trap. So again, imagine you're my client. And my client perhaps has tried to solve problems in a consistently unhealthy manner, often doing the same thing over again, expecting different results. Some have referred to that in 12-step programs as the definition of insanity. And so Hayes actually uses an analogy or a metaphor of a Chinese finger trap. He'll say, or teaches therapists to say, the situation you're experiencing is something like a Chinese finger trap. Remember that old child's toy? It was a woven tube, usually 2 different colors, maybe a blue and a red, or maybe a tan and a green. But it was about this long, and it was tied together, and you could put your fingers in there, and when you put your fingers in there, that was an easy thing to do. But when you tried to pull your finger out, what happened was that the tube constricted so that you couldn't pull your fingers out. This is what our minds do to us. Our minds put us in a Chinese finger trap, believing that we can solve things in the same manner or using those arbitrary and relational frames that to this point have not been helpful to us. I like that analogy. I've used that with many different clients. Hayes also talks about metaphor that can be told to clients. And I'm actually going to read you his metaphor of the hungry tiger. Now, sometimes people say, okay, you can read that at a workshop, but I can't read that with a client. Look, it's impossible for me to remember every story, every parable, every metaphor that would be useful with clients. So if there's something I think would be awesome for them to hear, here's the way I will usually approach it with a client. I'd love to teach you something, and I'd love for you to learn the truths that are contained within this story. Probably one of the easiest ways to set aside the tension of yesterday, the stress about tomorrow, and really focus on the meaning of the story is, as you're here in the office, here in the chair, to simply close your eyes. And so with the eyes closed, I'm actually going to read for you a story. Now, the reason why I'm reading is real simple. I want to make sure I cover everything that's important to you today. And this story is called The Parable of the Hungry Tiger. And so go ahead and close your eyes if your eyes aren't closed yet. And imagine you woke up one morning just outside your front door. And you found an adorable tiger, kitten, mewing. Of course, you bring the cuddly little guy inside to keep as a pet. And after playing with him for a while, you notice he's still mewing nonstop. And you realize he must be hungry. You feed him a little bit of bloody red ground beef, knowing that's what tigers like to eat. You do this every day until your pet tiger grows bigger. Over the course of 2 years, your tiger's daily meals change from hamburger scraps to prime rib to entire sides of cattle. Soon your little pet no longer mews when hungry. Instead, he growls ferociously at you when it's mealtime. Your cute little pet has turned into an uncontrollable, savage beast that will tear you apart if it doesn't get what he wants. Your struggle with your pain can be compared to this imaginary pet tiger. Every time you empower your pain by feeding it the red meat of experiential avoidance, you help your pain tiger grow a little bit larger and a little bit stronger. Feeding in this manner seems like a prudent thing to do. The pain tiger grows ferociously, telling you to feed it whatever it wants or it will eat you. Yet every time you feed it, you help the pain to become stronger, more intimidating, and more controlling of your life. If your eyes aren't open, go ahead and open your eyes. Take in a breath. A fascinating metaphor that I think can be very useful with a lot of clients. Let me share one more metaphorical story, and I share this with a lot of clients. I share this with my clients who come to see me because they are 450 pounds, they're 48 years old, and they're going to die in the next 2 years if they don't lose half their body weight. I use this with clients who've engaged in self-defeating behavior and need to recognize that they can actually care for themselves. I use this with clients who come to see me for functional pain. That's pain that is real. It's real to the client. They really feel the pain, but is medically unexplainable. I work with a lot of functional pain control clients. In fact, they come to see me and they say, I've been to every doctor and they tell me it's in my head. Now I'm here. I feel like I'm crazy. But I love the nursing definition of pain. Anything the client says is pain is in fact pain. But I work with a lot of those folks. And so I use this metaphor with a wide variety of clients, with eating disordered clients, with other clients, to help them learn the many truths that are contained in this story or metaphor. So go ahead, you can imagine you're my client, and go ahead and close your eyes. Again, earning CEU hours with the eyes closed is really pretty cool. I don't know what your grandmother was like, but my grandmother loved to grow a garden. And when I was a little kid, I actually remember laying in the grass by the garden as my grandmother would prepare the soil in the springtime, and as she would plant seeds. And as the spring rain come, I would watch her pull the small weeds out of the ground she had prepared, and would watch her label the various fruits and vegetables she had planted. And I loved it when they would begin to sprout from the ground and they would begin to grow into vines. And when flowers would begin to emerge on the vines, and those yellow flowers would give way to a small green bulb. It was always amazing to me how this happened. And each day, each morning, my grandmother would go out and she would tend to her garden, and I would lay there in the grass and I would watch her work. And over the course of the summer, those yellow flowers that gave way to green bulbs would become larger and larger, and the green would turn to a yellow hue, and from a yellow hue to a pinkish red, and from a pinkish red to a brilliant red as those tomatoes would grow larger and larger and become perfect. During the summer months, my grandmother would go out to the garden. She would pick those tomatoes. She would bring them in the house, and sometimes she would slice them and put them on a plate with a little bit of salt and pepper and vinegar and oil as an appetizer. Sometimes she would slice them and put them on our salad, and sometimes we would have them in a variety of dishes that she prepared and that she cooked. I still remember, even though that was a long time ago, my grandmother and her garden. And it occurred to me one day, I was just driving down the road, years after I had last seen my grandmother in the garden. Those tomatoes never had to ask my grandmother, how much rain from the sky should I drink? How much nutrition from the soil should I absorb? Intuitively, those perfect tomatoes, each and every year, would become exactly the way they were supposed to be in order to be delicious treats like none other each and every summer. And as you breathe in, breathe out, you can get ready to open the eyes, feeling the floor below you and the air in the room around you and hearing my voice on your computer monitor. Taking a breath and open the eyes, feeling fantastic. I love teaching stories, teaching metaphors, teaching parables. They can be long stories like the one I just told you, or they can even be short stories. I love telling this one to my clients. Sometimes they'll express frustration about the progress of therapy or about their progress in personal aspects of their life. And I will share with them the words of a Polish poem I once heard years ago. The stream said to the river, you go quickly, I go slowly, but together we reach the sea. Anybody doing 12-step counseling knows that the first 164 pages of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous cover the 12 steps. But the last 300 and some pages of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous are called the stories. And I hear people in 12-step programs all the time say, you can't get sober on the fellowship alone, you need to work the steps. The reality is most people never work the 12 steps. Most people do stay sober on the fellowship alone. Because when they fellowship with others who have learned important ways of making change, they hear those stories and they're able to take the learnings into their own life and apply them in a healthy way. The research and the work that Milton Erickson did on the subconscious mind is really fascinating and really can help us to understand how we can tap into that part of the mind that really guides so many of our choices, our actions, and the impulses of these relational frames by using the methods of acceptance and commitment therapy, metaphor, parable, story, and poetry. And I think those are great gifts that we can give our clients in the context of professional psychotherapy. ACT therapy is, of course, very well known for its use of acronyms. There are many acronyms to help us remember things in ACT therapy and as a training tool to teach clients as well. I encourage you to learn what those are by doing some additional research, getting some specific training in this area during full day or full week programs. We offer some of those, and there are a number of other resources as well. In fact, you can find out what some of those resources are by going to, and I'm not sure if it's contextualpsychology.org or contextualpsychology.com. Hopefully both of those lead to the same place and one isn't a porn site, but I can't recall if it's contextualpsychology.org or contextualpsychology.com. But you can find many resources for additional training there. The cool thing I love about the Organization for Contextual Psychology is that it is a values-based organization. members can contribute, what they think the organization is worth to them. And so if you're looking for a professional affiliation and gaining some additional training, that will be a tremendous resource to you. I wish I had time to go into details of all of those things related to acceptance and commitment therapy. On our main page at fastceus.com, we do have a 3-hour continuing education course in specifically a text-based course in acceptance and commitment therapy. The cool thing about our online courses is that you can access all of those materials free of charge. You can go download the whole thing and you can print it off or read it on your own time and use that material to help you become a better therapist. The only time you actually pay for the materials is if you decide to take the quiz and complete the continuing education component of it and receive a CEU certificate. So there are many resources on our main webpage, fastceus.com, to help you continue your learning process. And of course, if you're interested in additional continuing education hours, we do offer those on our main page at fastceus.com. I want to take the time that I have remaining, though, to talk about the approaches of solution-focused brief therapy. I am one who really enjoys brief therapy. I started out my career a long time ago working with clients in inpatient and residential treatment settings. I've had a lot of experience where I've worked with clients on a long-term basis. In private practice, because I both teach and see clients, I am uninterested in doing long-term therapy with people. I just don't want to see the same client week after week for 2 years. I've done that type of work before. I've worked with the catastrophically mentally ill. I've used traditional approaches to psychology, and I'm really interested in the strategic and the brief therapeutic approaches. And clinical hypnosis really is an application often of these specific strategies that we label as Ericksonian or solution-focused brief therapy or strategic or even structural. I mean, we can use, a lot of people don't realize I actually have a copy of Albert Ellis's book here from the 70s, The Practice of Rational Emotive Therapy. And people don't realize that Albert Ellis actually was a big proponent of clinical hypnosis, often confronting cognitive errors in the context of hypnotherapy. So I do brief work with my clients. I offer a variety of different services to my clients, but I love solution-focused brief therapy because it is an outcome-based protocol that demonstrates efficacy with many clients in typically 3 to 5 sessions. This is consistent with other forms of strategic therapy where we see rapid results, really sometimes for some phenomenal difficulties. The evidence-based protocols of solution-focused brief therapy have been enumerated in numerous different studies, and you can again go to scholar.google.com and you can type in SBFT or solution-focused brief therapy, and you can see many outcome studies showing its efficacy. And overall, when applied in meta-analysis, we see that more than 60% of clients report that after 3 to 5 sessions, they have achieved the results that they have desired. That's really a pretty remarkable number. I'm going to take smoking cessation. Even though I recognize many therapists don't work with that market, I do. Here's an interesting statistic. About 5% of the people who decide to quit smoking and go cold turkey are successful. 5%. 95% of the people who decide they're going to quit smoking continue to smoke. Of those who use nicotine replacement therapy, patches, gum, inhalers, lozenges, a wide variety of different ways to use nicotine replacement therapy, the U.S. Surgeon General's guidelines recommend the use of nicotine replacement therapy for clients who score a score of 6 or higher on a nicotine assessment that's called the Fagerstrom Scale of Nicotine Dependency. And the reason why is because for those clients addicted to the drug nicotine, what we find is that nicotine replacement therapy increases the likelihood of success to about 20%. Okay? So we're looking at 5% and we're looking at 20%. Now let's take recent medications that have been used. Chantix is a popular medication that's used to help people quit smoking. And some of the clinical studies have suggested that up to 40% of the people who use Chantix can actually be successful at smoking cessation. That's pretty good. See, solution-focused brief therapy is showing efficacy in problem solving of more than 60%, which, by the way, is consistent with my results. In my office, probably about 80% to 90% of those people who see me for clinical hypnosis are successful and no longer smoke cigarettes. It's not because hypnosis is magic. It's because in a state of focus or concentration, I employ the modality of ACT therapy and the modality of solution-focused brief therapy, which you can do with or without the formal process of hypnosis. Somebody said to me, how do you get people into trance? And I thought it was sort of a humorous question, in that we're always in trance all the time. The question for the hypnotist isn't how do we get people into trance. In many cases, is how do we get them out of that smoking trance. So my results have been very high because I'm employing these methods, which are demonstrated as outcome-based protocols. By the way, my results aren't particularly remarkable. I have on my webpage, and if you're interested, I'll post them in our forum at changeworkforum.com, some of the statistics on behavioral supported methods of using ACT and solution-focused brief therapy to help people make change in the context of hypnotherapy. And we have studies that typically indicate about an 80% to 90% success rate. And so when we're looking at 60% for one specific approach to therapy, that's pretty good. Because remember, for those who weren't responsive, we can apply other strategies. It doesn't mean they're without hope. It means that's where we bring in the acceptance and commitment therapy, or the dialectical behavioral therapy, or ratify it with clinical hypnosis, or use mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. It simply means, it doesn't mean 40% can't be helped. It simply means that this is pretty effective when compared to traditional approaches of psychodynamic therapies, or when we look at approaches that are strictly behavioral in nature. Who developed solution-focused brief therapy? A number of different therapists have been instrumental. It was developed primarily in Wisconsin, and the approach has been primarily developed by Stephen DeShazar and by Insoo Kim Berg. And so those are the authors you're going to be looking for. There's a pragmatic emphasis in solution-focused brief therapy. And I'll give here's a couple of resources. These are probably my two favorite resources. Interviewing for Solutions. That's a book by DeJong, D-E space J-O-N-G, and by Insoo Kim Berg. You spell Insoo, I-N-S-O-O, Kim, K-I-M, Berg, B-E-R-G. And the other book by DeShazar and Dolan, D-O-L-A-N, is More Than Miracles, The State of the Art of Solution-Focused Brief Therapy. These books teach a pragmatic approach to problem solving. In addition to teaching a pragmatic approach to problem solving, they really focus not on fixing what's wrong with our clients, but in taking what's right and strengthening our client to draw on those resources. Now, back in the 90s, things began to shift. And I was working in the early 90s in a residential treatment program for adolescents. And back then in the early 90s, we may have actually had the ability to actually fix clients, if you want to use that word. We would have adolescents as they were going through Piaget's developmental stages, sometimes 2 or 3 years in residential treatment. Of course, managed care changed all that. Residential treatment is now in 7-day increments, not to exceed a maximum of 21 calendar days per year. And so things really began to change with managed care in the 1990s, and I recognized that it was going to be impossible for me to fix what was wrong with my clients. My clients would come to me and they had catastrophic family difficulties, sexual difficulties, financial difficulties, social difficulties, educational difficulties. I would do a psychosocial evaluation and it was problem after problem after problem after problem. And I would literally write with a new admission 10 or 15 or 20 pages of problem after problem. And one day I realized in the time constraints that I have, and the resources available to me, I can't fix any of these problems. And I became an effective therapist, I think, in the 90s because I stopped trying to fix what was wrong. And instead, that last question on the psychosocial evaluation, what are the client's strengths? I decided to move to the top, recognizing that that was the most important question because really I don't have the ability to fix what's wrong. On my current client intake form in my office, I used to have a question there. What are your strengths? What are your deficits? A few years ago, I actually took off the what are your deficits, the what are your problems. I took that off my intake form. I don't even ask that because with the clients who I work with, I really don't have time to fix what's wrong. What I have the ability to do is take what's right and strengthen that and use that to compensate for the deficits that exist. Let me give you an example using you. I said in this webinar I would actually use you so that you could experience these things. So here's one of those exercises that I'm going to ask you to reflect on related to your own personal traits. Think for a moment about your deficits. What's wrong with you? What do you not like about yourself? What do you struggle with? Think about it for a minute. Most people usually don't need the full minute. They're usually pretty good at identifying those things that they struggle with: impulsive, quick to judgment, procrastinator, not a big enough risk taker, talk too much, don't talk enough. I mean, come up with the things that you really struggle with in life. AA might call these character defects. Now take a moment. This is a much harder question. Identify 3 things that are right with you. Why is it awesome to be you? You're a superstar, you're a mental health professional, you're taking a continuing education course. It's great to be you. Why is it awesome to be you? What strengths do you have? By the way, sometimes my clients, when I ask them what's right with you, they look at me like I have no idea. In order for me to be effective with my clients, they have to be able to identify their strengths. And so you take a moment right now and identify what's right with you. There's that Jeopardy. I need one of those old-time cassette players with the Jeopardy song on it. It's a little bit harder to identify those things that are right with you. Now that you've done that, though, the reason you're a healthy person, I'm going to make the assumption that those who are taking my continuing education courses are the healthy people, only an assumption. But I'm going to make the assumption that you're the healthy person. The reason you're a healthy person is not because you don't have deficits. You were able to identify what's wrong with you. The reason why you're a healthy person is that despite your deficits, you have learned how to take your strengths and to compensate for those deficits. And this is the approach of solution-focused brief therapy. It looks not at what's wrong and how do we fix what's wrong. It doesn't like the diagnostic model and the pathological model of the DSM-4 and the DSM-5. It looks at what's right. And despite what's wrong, it tries to use those things to compensate for the deficits. That really is a tremendous approach consistent with the limited time and limited resources we have in a managed care era. Back in the 90s, when I began to really think about and develop my own approaches towards a positive-based model of psychology, I actually recognized that it was important for my clients to identify, not for me to tell them, but for them to self-identify their strengths or their resources. And so I came up with an assessment tool. It's called the Non-Guard Strengths and Resources Inventory. It's been available widely since the 1990s. You can get a course on it on the main page of FastCEUs.com. And again, you can access those resources and the learnings for free. You only need to pay if you submit it for a continuing education certificate. So you can actually go look for that course on our main page for the Non-Guard Strength and Resources Inventory. And what it does is when I have a new client come in, I give them that one-page NSRI form. And I have them look at the different categories. I think there are 7 categories. There's both an adolescent and an adult version. And have them identify their own strengths and their own resources. Strengths and resources are a little bit different. Strengths are those attributes, I don't know, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, reverent. Strengths are those internal attributes that help a person to problem solve. Resources are a little bit different. When I have a client in crisis, I need to know what the resources are. For example, if you and I lost our job today, okay, let's say we got fired tomorrow, would you still be unemployed 60 days from now? The answer to that is probably no. Why? Because you have an education, you have a resume, you have references, you have a telephone so people could call you, you have reliable transportation so you can get to work. Those are the resources that are available to us during a crisis. And different clients have different resources available. Although some of my clients don't utilize their strengths and resources, and some of my clients don't know what their strengths and resources are. And although some of my clients are very limited in their strengths and resources, I have never had a client yet who had no strengths and no resources. Not one. By the way, I've worked in some tough situations. Sex offender treatment programs, inpatient care, probation department services, all of these types of scenarios. I've worked with a wide variety of catastrophically impaired clients. Schizophrenics, catastrophic eating disorders, bipolar disordered individuals. And although I've met people who were limited in their strengths and resources, I've never met anybody yet who didn't have something right with them. And this is really the focus of solution-focused brief therapy, drawing on the resources of the client rather than trying to use pathological labels and spending our time either with medication or therapeutic approaches, fixing what's wrong. Solution-focused brief therapy is probably best known for its use of the miracle question. And I'm going to show you a video clip where I actually take a client. I'm going to role play actually with my son, Alex, my youngest son. Don't worry, he's not 3. In fact, he's bigger than me. But I'm going to actually role play this with my son just for brevity and time rather than and confidentiality rather than showing this with a real client. But this is a process I go through to help my client uncover what solutions might be to their experiences based on the miracle question. And here's the miracle question. I think it's really important to identify what it is. Here's the traditional version. I'm going to read for you the traditional version. I'm going to ask you a rather strange question. The strange question is this. After we talk, you'll go back to your work, or your home, or your school. And you'll do whatever you need to do the rest of the day. Taking care of children, cooking dinner, watching TV, working, taking a bath. And then it'll be time to go to bed. After everybody in the house is quiet and you are asleep, in the middle of the night, a miracle happens. A miracle happens, and the problem that prompted you to come here is solved, no longer exists. But because this happens when you're sleeping, you have no way of knowing that there was an overnight miracle that solved the problem. So, when you wake up tomorrow morning, what might be the small change that will make you say to yourself, wow, something must have happened. The problem is gone. Let me read the last part of that miracle question for you again. So when you wake up tomorrow morning, what might be that small change that will make you ask yourself or say to yourself, wow, something must have happened in the middle of the night. The problem is gone. This question seems at face value to be a very simple question. But remember, my client is in bed when they wake up. The change that they're going to note is going to be an internal change. It's probably not going to be something they see. If my client says, well, I go through the day and then I would notice a change because that was no longer there and this was no longer there. Now the question is, how when you wake up in the morning, would you know that the problem was lifted, that it was gone? You see, I'm looking for something internal. And when I identify that through the use of the miracle question, it establishes what it is that I am working for in therapy. This cuts out much of the time related to assessment and trying to find what's most important to the client. And almost every client who I've ever asked this to had enough insight to be able to generate, with some time perhaps, an answer to this miracle question. I'm going to just demonstrate this with Alex in a video clip so you can actually see how I might use the miracle question with a client. And I think that I'm actually using a script here. The reason why, this is actually a clip from another training program. And I do like things written down. As you can tell, I've used some notes here and there, and I've referred to some things. And I think it's perfectly okay for us to be prepared with our clients by having written materials on our desk. I don't pretend that I have to memorize everything for all of my clients. And I want you to know that that can be an effective way to really bring depth to your therapy sessions. So here is that clip. So here's an example of how I might use the miracle question with a client in therapy. Go ahead and close your eyes. And now that you've created a focused state, it's amazing how clearly you can identify your own resources, your own needs, and even measure your success. This is one attribute of hypnosis that's so helpful. This ability to really identify answers to questions that when we're less focused or when we have distractions, aren't really able to fully appreciate. I'm going to begin this part of our hypnosis session by asking you a question. This question is sometimes called the miracle question. If last night you had, in the middle of the night, a miracle occur that rendered your problem, your symptoms, your emotions, your situation completely resolved, and you woke up this morning with absolutely no issues, how would you have known that that miracle took place? Kind of an interesting question, isn't it? If that miracle took place in the middle of the night where you were asleep and you woke up, how would you know when you woke up that that miracle had taken place? What would you feel? What would you observe? What would you be aware of to let you know that that miracle took place? I'm going to give you a few moments, Alex, to really think about it. To identify how you would have known that that miracle had taken place, what you would feel, what you would observe, or what you would be aware of that would let you know that that miracle had taken place. Now, open your eyes. Go ahead, open your eyes. Yeah, open them wide. It's okay. Tell me, how do you know that that miracle had taken place?
I'd feel more confident,
Okay.
less pressured by myself.
Okay.
I wouldn't be so overthinking of all my issues. I'd relax more.
Okay. So you'd wake up feeling good, huh?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, go ahead and close your eyes again. Close your eyes. Let those eyelids become relaxed again, knowing it's easy to continue breathing, relaxing, learning, and to even continue with our session. The answers that you just gave me are going to be important because it's not only how we're going to measure success, but it even tells us how we're going to create success. You said, for example, I wouldn't feel this pressure on me all the time, as if I was being weighted down. So during our session, we're going to release the weight of those emotional perspectives by taking away its power to control. In fact, just at this moment, by coming here today, you've already taken the first step in releasing its hold on you by learning something new. And again, this is only a demonstration. So when you're ready, Alex, take in a breath and open your eyes, feeling fantastic, ready for the next demonstration. But this miracle question gives me a pathway for developing suggestions and identifying, kind of like that first exercise on core values, really what's most important to my client. And it was interesting, Alex, the things that you thought of really were fairly kinesthetic. They were all really feeling based, and you did a good job of describing those things. Was it easy for you to visualize what it would be like waking up and feeling as if a miracle had taken place? Were you able to put yourself into that state?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's kind of amazing, huh?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the miracle can happen for all of our clients. There used to be an old evangelist here in Tulsa, and, he would always say something like, the miracle is you. And we have the resources inside of us to create a miracle each and every day. And contextual psychology and outcome-based treatments give us a lot of approaches for being able to do that. The use of questioning, of course, is a 100-year-old concept in psychotherapy. Freud would have clients answer the question with the first word that popped into their mind, free association. Questioning clients about the things that they had experienced previously as we look for ways to emotionally release through catharsis or abreaction. The technique of Sigmund Freud is a questioning approach. As we move forward in history, though, we see that the questions really begin to change a little bit. And Richard Bandler and John Grinder identified two great questioners. One was family therapist Virginia Satir. And what Virginia Satir did in her questioning is she would become very, very minute in her questioning, looking for the devil in the details. Looking as she questioned somebody about what they sensed, what they felt, what they thought, or what they experienced, or what they shared in couples counseling, and how they interpreted that and what they heard. And it is referred to in Bandler's writing as he looked at the work of Virginia Satir as chunking down, becoming very, very specific in our questioning, looking for the solution. The Milton model of questioning is a different approach, one where we come up, one where Milton Erickson would look for that which was most likely to produce a response by the client based on its lack of specificity. For example, I'll give you a simple example so we don't get lost in the details here. If I were to guide you through a visualization or a relaxation process, and I were to have you close your eyes, and I became very specific in my imagery, imagine yourself in a purple chair, sitting back as cool jazz plays in the background. Well, you might not like purple chairs, you might not like jazz, you might not be able to hear that. And so when I become very specific in my imagery, you reject it. But if I were to simply say in a relaxation exercise, and as you relax, imagining yourself either a place that you've been before or a place that you'd like to go, or even a place of your own creation that is tranquil and peaceful to you, you notice the difference there. Everybody's been to a place they've been before, a place they'd like to go, or a place of their own creation. So there's no opposition here. And so Erickson's Milton model asked broader and broader questions until we were at a point where confrontation, that's one of the strategies of psychotherapy, was something they could buy into. These are the language patterns. Well, solution-focused brief therapy also asks a series of questions, and I love the questions from solution-focused brief therapy. As a therapist, you're probably already skilled in questions. Learning these four types of questions in solution-focused brief therapy, though, can go a long way to helping you improve your results in psychotherapy. The first is, of course, that miracle question, and I demonstrated that process with Alex in the video. The next, though, are what are called scaling questions. You see, my clients, when they come to me, they see their depression as all or nothing. They see their anxiety as all or nothing. They see their drinking as all or nothing. They see their marriage as all or nothing. They see their their stability as all or nothing. They see their fear as all or nothing. They see their panic as all or nothing. They see their future outlook on life as all or nothing. What separates the healthy from the unhealthy person is that we have scalability. And so I ask my clients a scaling question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how depressed are you today? On a scale of 1 to 10, how angry does that make you feel? Which, by the way, relational frame theory earlier is an arbitrary frame. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry does that make you feel? Well, it makes me feel a 10 or a 3 or a 4. And suddenly my clients can see their problems on a spectrum of severity. This, by the way, is what the new DSM-5 is going to be doing, having us scale our clients' problems into perspective. Because we create a different intervention at a level 2 than we do at a level 4 at a level 8. I cover this in our webinar on the DSM-5 that's coming up here in a couple of weeks. But in therapy, my clients will scale their problems 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And different levels have different responses. And so my client's behavior, which to this point has been all or nothing, no longer needs to be all or nothing because of questions that teach the process of scalability. Exception-seeking questions. Those are really the third classification of questions. And proponents of solution-focused brief therapy believe that there is always a time when a problem is less severe or absent for a client. It may be hard to identify, we may have to go back for a while, but there's always a time when the problem the client is presenting with is either absent or less severe to an extent that they don't need to resolve the issue. And so what we're doing is we're asking questions about the different circumstances that exist during these times, finding the solutions that my client implemented during those times, and then asking them to use those interventions and choices again. Let me share with you an example related to substance abuse. I've done a lot of drug and alcohol counseling, and the exception-seeking question was always one of my favorites. Let's say I have somebody with a long history of drug and alcohol abuse. Even though they might not have had very many sober days in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I was always able to identify with my client at least one time that they normally would have used drugs or alcohol, but simply didn't, for whatever reason. And I might have to go back a couple weeks or a couple months or even a couple years, but there was always a time when normally they would have used drugs or alcohol, but for whatever reason didn't. Maybe they were in jail and couldn't get access to it, although that's probably not likely since jails are full of drugs and alcohol. But maybe it was that weekend 3 years ago when they were at their mother's for Easter, and because mom was a religious person or because the friends weren't around or because they didn't have transportation or whatever reason, even though they normally would have been drunk all weekend, they weren't. What does that tell me? Well, visit your mother. Surround yourself with people who care about you. Enjoy the tranquility of nature in that rural area where mother lives. I mean, I can find solutions when I look to the exception. And solution-focused brief therapy has me ask my client when they found a time that the problem they're complaining of was absent. And in that absent period, I will find the resources, this is important, that they already know how to utilize. You see, it's so much easier in therapy to utilize the resources for problem solving that already exist within my client than trying to give them new resources that to this point had never existed. The fourth question, let me go over the list. Anytime I number things, people say, but wait, I missed 3 or I missed 2. Number 1, the miracle question. Number 2, scaling questions. Number 3, exception-seeking questions. And the 4th, coping questions. What coping questions do is they're designed to elicit information about the client resources that have gone, in many cases, unnoticed by them. And so even if we have a client with a very hopeless story, extreme difficulty, a story where we're dealing with cancer or child sexual abuse or catastrophic grief, our clients who even have the most difficult stories can often find answers that exist within them, resources that exist within them through the use of solution-focused brief therapy's coping question. So here's the question. I can see that things have been really difficult for you. Yet I'm struck by the fact that even so, you manage to get up every morning and do everything necessary to get the kids off to school, go to work each day, package the mail, whatever it is that people do. How did you do that? What a great question. This is a three-part question. One, it begins with empathy and identification. It's rapport building. I can see that things have been really difficult, or I can hear how things were so difficult for you, or I can only imagine how difficult things really were for you on a day-by-day basis. The second part of the question identifies a fact, an objective truth, and that is that despite this difficulty, wow, you were able to get up every morning. You were able to take care of those kids. You were able to, do the job. You were able to, whatever it was that they were, be confined in that prisoner of war cell. It could be anything here. But I'm struck by the fact that you managed to each day go through this ordeal and do it. How did you do that? By expressing a genuine curiosity in the third part, the true question here, what we elicit from them are their strengths, their resources, their tools for problem solving. This really is a magnificent question that's asked in solution-focused brief therapy, the coping question. And one of my favorite strategies for, instead of me trying to make them okay, taking what's right within my client and helping them to identify those things and take action on them. Just like almost any other philosophy of change, there are presuppositions to an approach. I shared with you some of Stephen Hayes' presuppositions related to acceptance and commitment therapy. Here are some of the presuppositions associated with solution-focused brief therapy, which I think are awesome presuppositions that we can bring into the therapeutic process to help us work with people to make change. First of all, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's really a great presupposition. A lot of my clients try to, in their anxiety, try to have me help them avoid what doesn't yet exist. I think a lot of therapeutic time is spent trying to help clients manage what yet doesn't exist. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it ain't here yet, don't worry about it. Presupposition number 2. If it works, don't stop doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing what works. This is important. If it's not working, whatever it is you're doing to problem solve, do something different. It doesn't mean try harder or, work on that smarter. It actually means do something entirely different. If, for example, your parenting is producing the same results, do something different in your parenting. I remember one day I was really frustrated with my kids. They were little at the time. My kids are now big. They're grown. It's awesome. In fact, you just saw my youngest son. He's the last one in the house. But I remember when my kids were little. I don't even remember how old they were. Let's call them 6, 4, 2. They were little kids, and they got in trouble in preschool. And the old parenting approach wasn't working. It was the oldest one who actually had gotten in trouble, and so it was pickup time, and I started, instead of driving to a house, I started driving the other direction. And the kids said, "Hey, where are we going?" And I said, "Oh, we're going downtown to the bus station." So what do you mean we're going to what's a bus station? They didn't even know. I said, we're going to go down, so we're going to eat over here. They wanted to go to their favorite restaurant or something. I said, no, we're going to go downtown. We're going to eat at the bus station, because if you're not good in school and you don't do well in school, and instead of riding in your own car or airplane, you have to ride on the bus, and you're going to see what the bus station is like. This was all out of frustration, but you know what? My kids still talk about when I took them to dinner at the bus station. what a wacky idea for parenting. I'm not even sure I'd do that again. But it really was an entirely different approach. One of the other presuppositions is that small steps actually lead to big changes. We don't need to solve all of these problems right now. We can make small steps because small steps lead to big changes. I don't know if you remember the movie What About Bob, but the book that Richard Dreyfuss wrote, if it had been a real book, it probably would have been pretty good. The title of the book was Baby Steps. The future is both created and negotiated. That's an important concept. Nothing exists without it being a thought first. Now we're into metaphysics and we're out of time. But this really is an important concept for therapy. A solution is not necessarily related to the problem. We can go back to acceptance and commitment therapy, and we can see that we create arbitrary relational frames that tell us a misbelief, a cognitive error, and that is that a solution and a problem are related, but in fact they can come from entirely different sources. Solution language is different than problem language. You know, there's a lot to you are what you think, and you think what you say. An approach that doesn't look at diagnosis and disease and pathology, but solution-oriented language is important. And when my clients self-label with negative, self-defeating labels that really do them no good, I recognize that and confront them on their choice of problem language rather than solution-focused language. This is one of my favorites. Change is inevitable. Problems do not happen all of the time. In other words, even if it's lousy right now, it'll get better. I used to have a friend who was a minister, and I know it sounded negative, but he actually said this, and it was actually positive. He would say, "It's all going to burn in the end anyway." Wow. It's all going to burn in the end anyway. Wow. So negative. But you know what? His point was well taken, and that was that whatever you're worrying about today isn't going to be there forever. Change is inevitable. Problems do not happen all of the time. There is a time when the problem will not be present. And as we look at solutions for effective therapy, cooperation is the core principle of effective psychotherapy. Finding ways to cooperate with the client. Rather than confronting resistance, recognize that not as something bad, but something that simply is. Refusing to become enmeshed, practicing your own acceptance and commitment therapy by letting go of what we in the past may have labeled as a resistant client and simply seeing it as it is, a client trying to employ a solution to the best of their ability. Now, I've spent 3 hours with you talking to you about a variety of different strategies and techniques and ideas for making psychotherapy more effective. Whether you're doing social work, professional counseling, addiction treatment, marriage and family therapy, clinical hypnosis, all of these ideas can be integrated into the work that we do. I hope that you've benefited from the exercises that I've engaged you in and the resources that I've pointed to you throughout this workshop. There are a number of other resources available to you, and those are our upcoming webinars. Our webinar on changes in the DSM-5, on impulsivity, our changes on specific disorders and treatments that are available on our website at fastceus.com, in addition to all of our traditional mental health training courses that are available really 24/7. In our forum at changeworkforum.com, you can participate in the discussion, ask me questions, and ask other mental health professionals questions, and find answers to help you become a better therapist. That's on our Facebook page at changeworkforum.com, and I'd love it if you'd join us over there. I want to thank you for your participation in today's webinar. Right below here is a link, and you can complete the evaluation. It'll take you about 1 minute to do so, and what it will actually do is it will generate for you a CEU certificate automatically to your email box. One more thing, please add our email to your address book, info@fastceus.com. Make sure you get the email we send you. It has information about not only upcoming events, but CEU certificates and timely information from the state boards that you may need to know related to continuing education. Thank you for your participation. Please add some additional comments. It helps me make webinars better. Right below here is that link, complete that evaluation of learning. Check your email box after you do so, and you'll find you have a printable CEU certificate. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you at an upcoming webinar on fastceus.com.